in a lot of ways, we didn't have guidance from or someone to kind of show us that way. And what I think was powerful with us is we have all these different pathways to aviation, into the space. And right now we're specifically talking about pilots. But we know, we live, and then we grow. And so that's the grow part is where I think that's why we're here.
What's going on, people? It is me, Kenny T, and Alex Cole out here. So what we gonna talk about today?
I don't know, man. It's first of all, it's a pleasure to be on. I don't get to do these too often with you, and you got a lot of amazing people. I think we were chatting a little bit before, and I think one of the best ways is just kind of talk about where we are, both of us as airline captains, and a lot of people see us at that point. I'm at the better airline at United, maybe, and with you at American, and like our journey, both of our journeys to this point. And I think it's important to just kind of maybe share a little bit about that and a little bit of the trials and tribulations. A lot of times people think that we like woke up and said, hey, I want to be an airline pilot. And then next thing you know,
it just happened.
Hey, I'm captain at United, so that's awesome. But I'll give a quick synopsis about me and a little bit of my journey, and then we'll just kind of pop back and forth. You like that? All right. Well, folks, for me, and KT knows this, I'm a United Airlines 737 captain. I've been at United Airlines for about 9 years. But my career started when I was, or my love for aviation started when I was a young kid. I was right around 12 years old. We lived in Okinawa, Japan. My dad was stationed at Kadena. And they had the SR-71 and F-15s there. And although my dad was not a pilot, my dad went to Tuskegee. Both my parents actually went to Tuskegee.
Hold up, this SR-71, like a
Blackbird.
static or like?
No, the real thing was flying.
The real?
Yeah. In a lot of ways, that means I'm that old. But in other ways, it means that as a kid, we could see it. And my best friend in junior high, his dad was an SR-71 pilot. So I had an amazing opportunity to go, and his dad, we toured the plane. And you could see, we saw the suit and everything in there, and he showed us all around in the hangar. And one of the indelible memories in my head was, as a kid, you could sit up on one of the hills, and I could see down on the flight line from where I lived. And I remember seeing that SR-71 taxi out, and then it would just launch, and you see the blue flames out of the back, and it would just go. And so Kadena, I believe it's east-west, if I remember. I was stationed there, I should know. But from what I remember, it was taking off in the west, and it just went like, it took off, and then it just disappeared. And I was like, I want to do that. And I was like, I don't know what that is. And then that was pretty much the limit of my desire. Like, I was like, I don't know how I'm going to get there.
You think about how many times you hear a story similar to that, where it was like a moment where it gets stuck in your brain, and then as you're going through and getting to different parts of the process of, all right, I know I want to do this. Well, how do I get there? And then you just have the image in your head. And it just drives you to like keep going to, all right, well, what's the next step? What's the next step? And that picture's just stuck in your head.
And so you have that end goal, right? And so, and I think with that end goal, what's powerful is it's that motivation to keep going, right? And so even when you hit the roadblocks, because inevitably you're going to hit a roadblock. Stuff happens that it doesn't, a lot of times you're like, well, what do I have to be an SR-7? That's what I want to be. Boom, I want to fly SR-71s. And they had F-15s at Kadena, and I remember seeing those in the overhead, and you could just hear them launch, and it was just, it really affected me at a young age, and it just helped me kind of continue. And I was like, well, that's my end goal. I know I can't get there right now, but what do I got to do to kind of get there?
What do I do next?
And what's funny is we moved from Kadena, we moved to Los Angeles. My dad got stationed in LA, and I was in high school, and I was like, well, I want to be a military pilot. And my dad, he's like, well, you probably need to go to ROTC, and that's what he did, ROTC at Tuskegee. And I said, well, I want to be a pilot. And he goes, all the pilots I know went to the Air Force Academy. And I was like, well, I don't even know where that is, and I don't know what that is. And so I applied to ROTC, and I got accepted to the Air Force Academy. And even then, if you would have thought I flew a plane, I didn't even touch a plane. I knew I wanted to do it, but I was like, well, I'm gonna let somebody else show me how to do it. And went there, I got to fly a glider, got to fly a Cessna, and I was like, oh man, this is kind of, this seems like the right thing. This works out for me, and everything is going. The Air Force Academy is just, it's a university in Colorado, and that's designed to create military officers, a lot like ROTC. It's just kind of the same pathway. But going there, it's tough. That was a tough one. I had to keep my end goal in mind.
Every day.
Going there, because it was not, I don't know, my experience, maybe there were other people, but my experience, it was not I don't know if I characterize it as fun.
I think nobody I've went to the academy characterized it as fun.
But I will say, lasting relationships with friends that you just long term.
So, what did you do to be able to be competitive for the Air Force Academy? Do you remember? Like, was there anything particular, like some highlights of like what got you there?
Yeah, I think for me, I was good at math and science.
Yeah.
And like I was like, all right, well, I'm pretty good at that. And I was athletically active. I was in band too. I did band. And then I played basketball and some football, but it was all just moments in time where I was just kind of trying things.
Yeah.
And I was not the captain of the football team. I was never captain of the basketball team. I wasn't any of those roles, but I was active in playing it. Now, I was president of one of the clubs we had in school, private. So just being involved in stuff. And I've always kind of been involved in a lot of different things.
Say just from things I've seen and heard, even working with the academy, is that whether from the past to even now, being involved in a lot of different activities in the high school, not being afraid to try different things.
Yeah.
When you step up and try to be a leader, that looks good. And math and science, as much as people run away from it, you do well in it. It's gonna help you out.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it sounds like the formula that you had to get there is pretty much the same formula nowadays that people have to get to the academy, which is some of those core things: be involved, be athletic, be good at staying in the books.
Just be well-rounded, right?
Right, and
I
that's
think
all that. Yeah,
I think whatever you're doing if you're trying to do the Air Force Academy, what's nice is whatever you're doing makes you super competitive for any
everything.
school.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of the same things that are involved in that. But finishing up there, you talk about. And one of the things we talked about is in life and different things kind of come at you. And so when I graduated, one of the things that had happened, the Department of Defense or the Air Force had decided to do a drawdown. And so I only went to the Air Force Academy to be a pilot. That was the only reason I went there, a military pilot. And my junior year, I got told only 25% of you guys are going to go to pilot training. And it was the top 25, and guess who was not in the top 25? This guy. And so, and that really, really messed with me when I graduated, because I said, I went to this place that I really didn't enjoy for an end goal, and I graduated, and they're like, hey, don't call us, we'll call you in a couple years.
So at that point, like, how did that, like, let's talk about how that made you feel right there. You did everything you were supposed to do.
Oh yeah, no.
And you didn't end up getting the goal the end result that you expected. How do you deal with that?
They talk about the stages of grief. There was a lot of anger. There was anger and disappointment that I had about what I had done. I was like, why did I even go here? Like, why did I, you lose sight sometimes of your end goal, and that nothing in life is permanent. They're temporary situations, and these opportunities, when you embrace the opportunities, when things don't go as planned, you're like, all right, well, I'm going to pivot for now, but I still have that end goal over there. And I had the opportunity. My degree was in civil engineering, and so the Air Force has a career in civil engineering. And ironically, my dad is a civil engineer. He was an architect, and he was a colonel at the time in the Air Force. And one of the beautiful things I got to do was I got stationed in Ohio at Wright-Patterson, and there was a Lieutenant Cole and Colonel Cole at the same base. So I was at the same base with my dad, just really from a family history kind of point. It was just awesome that we were both there. He ended up retiring probably about 2 years after I was there.
Yeah.
But he commissioned me. I was at his retirement. I was a participant in his retirement, and then actually sang the national anthem for his retirement. And then he actually retired me when I retired from the Air Force.
That's cool.
But I went and did that. I did engineering and civil engineering, and I learned a lot about myself. I learned that I was like, hey, if there's something that happens, I can do well at it.
Yeah.
All right, well, what are we doing here? All right, I'm not going to make this the end thing. And, 3 years later, the Air Force actually kept with their promise, and I went to pilot training.
So was it that they just had a pilot slot waiting on you at the end of 3 years, or you had to reapply for it?
They told me, I had a piece of paper, I laminated that stuff that said that they were going to send me to pilot training and that I did not have to reapply. And so I kept that, and they kept with the promise. I did not have to reapply, but it did take 3 years.
And so during that time, this unknown time frame you went to a job that you maybe not necessarily didn't want, and you still went there and did what you're supposed to do, did well at the job, and still maintain, your core beliefs and values that keep you working hard.
Yeah, yeah, and I think those are great points to highlight, because you still do your thing.
Yeah,
you still got to do your thing, and all of those, being able to kind of do something and do your best at it.
And I think something that I think a skill or a quality that people who end up achieving like the things they want to do, they have to find a way to do well at things that they don't necessarily want to do, which really is just discipline.
Yeah.
You have to be able to be excellent even when you're like, I have no desire to do this job, but I'm still going to go do it as good as I do any other job that I'd want to do. Because throughout the journey, there's all sorts of things that you don't want to do that's required for you to be able to get to that end goal. And you got to be able to still knock it out the park.
Yeah. And a thing that I've recognized more now is you can stay angry or disappointed in the space that you're in, or see the joy and the opportunity that's there. So one of the things I bring up when I did civil engineering is I was a project manager, and I would take teams out. I would be in command at 22, 23 years old. I had 15 troops with me, and we would go out and we'd do projects around the base. I got to drive a bulldozer, a front end loader. I got to drive all this heavy equipment that I never would have had a chance to do. And we knocked down this massive building at Wright Pat. They were like, hey, we need to tear down these buildings. They're from World War II. You can they should just crumble. And I was like, World War II was a long time ago, and these things are still here. And I'm like, all right, well, I don't know how to do that. But then I relied on the troops and everybody that were working with me. And I learned a lot about leadership there. A lot of times you don't always kind of understand it. But for me, when I recognize, if you think you're the smartest person in the room, you are not the smartest person in the room. Because you don't have to be good at everything. It's about understanding the team and the different people, the skill sets that you have. And I relied on here's an interesting one. There was a master sergeant that was working for me. He was my team lead with all the other enlisted troops.
Yeah.
That master sergeant was an airman under my dad 15 years prior. Because he looked at me, he's like, man, Cole, he's like, I know that. He's like, is your dad 𝐼𝐫𝐫𝐿? I was like, yeah. He's like, oh my gosh. And 15, 20 years later, he's working with me, and he had worked with my dad prior. So that was kind of an interesting, but it was just really neat to kind of go through it. Yeah, the legacy. That's right. And so that was kind of a really unique experience. But we're about flying. So eventually,
hold on. This is actually pretty cool. You kind of skimmed over, but you think about all the things that you want to do, things that kids want to do. I think about things when you're like, oh, I want to fly planes. I want to, drive bulldozers and excavators and all these things that like all the kids want to do. And you got to go do that.
I got to fire some big guns and drive Humvees around. It was a really good experience, because in civil engineering, we're the That's the force that goes out and prepares the base before the planes come in and you get all this stuff ready and you have to secure the area. And it was something that I never thought I would have the opportunity to do. And now, even though I think at that time, at that age, I was disappointed and there was a little bit of anger associated with that. When I look back on it, everything that happens in life happens for a reason, and it creates you to be your own unique person. And for that, it shaped something in me that I needed. I didn't know I needed.
Yeah.
But I had that opportunity to kind of see and do things and then be in the moment. I'm like, all right, well, this wasn't exactly what I planned, but let's see what this does and be happy and be blessed in that point.
So you got the call from the Air Force saying, all right, now you can actually go to pilot training. And on your way to pilot training, I guess, one, how'd you feel about getting pilot training, and were you ready when you got there?
Okay, so two things. This is probably not the best to say on here. Even though I wanted to be a pilot, do you think I flew a single plane in those 3 years? At an Air Force base with planes, and I'm around it. I didn't touch a single plane. I was like, the Air Force is going to teach me. So that was I will say that was poor planning on my part.
Before you go any further, why would you think the Air Force would train you to fly airplanes?
So I had this view that, well, everyone had said, and there's something, don't always believe your friends or do your own research, is that the program was designed to take you from zero to hero. And so I'm like, well, if it's designed to take me zero to hero, then why do I need to do anything extra? What I didn't realize is that there were other people that already had some flight experience that were going in it. And the way the Air Force's pilot training program is, the faster you learn, the faster progression you have, and then you can be at the top of your class. And if you're at the top of the class, you get to pick what planes you have, what plane you want of the available planes. And when I got there, I was with a group and a lot of good people, but there was somebody, he already had his private pilot's license. I was like, dude, you already know how to fly? And he's like, yeah. And he was acing everything. When we were doing instrument stuff, I was like, how do you know how to do that? I was all over it, up, down, left, right. When we got to instruments, the initial takeoff and landing, I caught up on. Now, I had flown. I'd flown the Cessna 182 at the Air Force Academy, and I had done soaring. But that was 4 years prior to me, and I hadn't touched a plane until I went to pilot training. It was, I could have done it better.
And so I'll go there with you, because in most people's minds, if someone hasn't told you what you should do, you might be like, well, the Air Force trained you to do is be a civil engineer. The Air Force trained,
like they're gonna give me training.
I was like, the Air Force taught me to be a avionics guy. And I was like, oh well, when it comes to flying, they're gonna teach you everything. You'll be all right.
They will teach you. You just may not be the top graduate. And then when you realize how that's set up, and I do want to, a lot of this is me, but I want to kind of touch on your career, on your journey, because I feel like a lot of mine is cookie cutter path. Even though there's ups and downs, it was kind of cookie cutter. You know, graduate high school, go to a school that designs, that is there to kind of a lot of ways to create pilots. And then I became a military pilot. I had an amazing career for 20 years and got out, and then I'm an airline pilot now, which a lot of people would say, well, that's kind of cookie cutter. And when you and I talk, I think what is really powerful is you didn't have that path.
Right.
You had a drastically different path, and I'd like to kind of pull on that. So can you just kind of show about like the beginnings of your journey?
So I like most people, when I was young, I wanted to fly planes. I wanted to do a lot of stuff, right? I was like, I want to be an action hero. I want to fly airplanes. I want to do cool stuff. I had got my first aircraft ride when I was in high school. I was in Army ROTC, And I remember we went and got to fly in a Huey.
Oh, okay.
Got to fly in a Huey with the doors open.
Oh yeah, it's a good time.
Sitting out, hanging out the helicopter, flying around, and that was one of my first time in a plane. But when I was younger, we used to live in Japan, and we also
were you in Okinawa as well, or you were in
we were up in Misawa.
Ah, okay.
And my mom was also stationed out at Tyndall.
Ah,
So
okay.
I always remember being at the air shows, watching the planes fly and everything. And so I was like, man, this is cool. I was like, I want to do that, and when I look back, I was like, I didn't know anybody who flew or was a pilot. So I just, I was like, well, read these books, watch these TV shows and everything. And I think you just go to ROTC or the academy or something and then you get there, right? That's, that was what I knew. My parents knew that I needed to get a degree and I needed to go and join the Air Force. That's how you do it, right?
Yep.
That's the way to do it. So for me, I was in ROTC for a year, and then I got medically disqualified from joining the Air Force.
Oh man.
And there's a waiver process for everything, but as I'm working through the waiver, I'm like, well, how long does the waiver take? In my mind, I'm like, oh, it's a waiver. I just send somebody this paper.
A couple weeks, it'll be right back.
A couple weeks, I'll be right back to
right as rain.
Right back to doing what I need to do, and I'll be all good. Well, we know it doesn't even work. It doesn't work like that in any way, shape, or form. So during that time, I didn't know what to do, if I'm being honest. I was like, well, if I can't be in the Air Force and fly, what am I gonna do?
Yeah.
And so it took me a while to figure out, like, what do I do? So I was working and trying to figure out how to stay motivated and towards something. And that was a challenge because I didn't know what else to do, right? And so the next steps for me were, well, maybe if I enlist in the Air Force, it'll be a way for me to be able to at least get in, if I can get in the Air Force and show that I can serve in the military.
That's in the Air Force, right? You're just going in, all right, yeah.
Right. I'll just enlist in the Air Force.
There you go.
And that'll work, right? So I tried to do this. They said, you can't. You need a waiver.
Yeah.
So the waiver, of course, was still
processing.
Long story short, it took 2 to 3 years. It took like 3 years because for however long this process worked. Partially because I had actually went to the Air Force Academy. I was a dependent at the time, so I went to the Air Force Academy doctors and said, "Hey, can y'all help me with this waiver?" And so they helped me out with the waiver.
You were in Colorado?
Yeah, I moved there because we were in New Mexico at some point. I moved up to Colorado.
When were you in Colorado?
In was it 99, 2000?
Oh, okay, yeah.
For the 99 2000.
Yeah. I was trying to avoid years to highlight how old we are, but yeah.
I know, right? Sure, that's 27. Man, that's 25 years ago.
Don't use the numbers. Don't use the numbers.
Delete that part now.
Yeah.
But I was there, and I had actually pushed up a congressional waiver because I was like, hey, the Air Force Academy docs say there's no reason that I can't be in the Air Force. What's going on?
Yeah.
And as I've learned, just bureaucracy is just piles of paperwork. So I get the academy said, yeah, he's fine. What's the problem? So they come back and they say, hey, you're good to go. You gotta, you're accepted. And then I remember they asked and they said, hey, do you want to go to the Air Force Academy? And they're like, hey, you want to go to the Air Force Academy? Because you went to Congress, we'll get you a letter based on all your stuff. You can. And that was like, this is where it's like a real big, real change in what I did with my life, right? Because my daughter was going to be born within 6 months.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And
so what I knew that I wouldn't be able to be at the Air Force Academy with the child. Yeah. So I had, made real life choices. And it's like, well, I said, I'm going to enlist in the Air Force since I can get in. I'll go and be able to take care of my family, make sure, my kid's good. And I'll be able to figure out how I'm going to finish school I'm in and then find another way. Because I was like, you can still become you still fly in the Air Force still if you, even through being enlisted, you can commission, right? So I go enlist and I get a job as an avionics technician. I was like, all right, I'm good at math. I like electronics. And let's do this. So talk about legacy. This was actually something that was pretty cool. And this was a really big impact on my view of like being able to accomplish these goals because at this point, everything still seems so far.
Oh yeah.
You know, I'm already, in my opinion, you know, I'm going the opposite direction
Yeah.
of where I'm trying to go.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was what I had to do, and that was a little bit discouraging. But I still, I think I'm a hopeless dreamer.
There you go. There's nothing wrong with that.
And because I look back and I'm like, man, other people would have been like, man, I just give up.
Just quit. Yeah, yeah.
You know, so I go to basic training, and basic training was basic training. And anybody who says, "Oh, Air Force basic training is like basic training sucks,"
I don't care
who you are.
When you go through it now, there are other harder ones, but it is a vast change from just going to the store, going to Target or whatever.
Basic training, and as you know, like going to basic training and tech school, I think I made probably some of the longest lasting friendships I had in my life. You know, some people that are really close to me
to this day.
To this day, you
That's
know.
What's up.
And so here's the thing, in tech school, you couldn't miss any days. They wouldn't adjust anything for like any off days. You couldn't take leave while you're there, no matter what. They're like, we don't care what's going on. You're not getting off any days. You're not going nowhere. We don't care. It doesn't matter. So my dad at the time, he was a tech sergeant in the Air Force. He got his degree while he was in commission.
Yeah.
He was at Maxwell. I was at Keesler. He was at Maxwell Air Force Base, and he sent a request. He said, hey, I'd like my son to give my first salute when he commissioned. And I remember I talked to my dad, and he was like, I'm trying, and I'm sitting there like, man, they ain't gonna let. I said, they ain't let nobody do nothing. My commander called me in his office, said, Aaron Thomas said, your class training date is adjusted to the right because you're gonna use 2 days of leave. You go to Montgomery, Alabama, come up with a plan how you're gonna get there, and then come back on this day. And I'm like, what? I'm sitting there like, officers got that much pull that.
Oh wow, that's
like,
amazing though that they did that.
It was. It made me realize that it wasn't. It was more about the fact that it was about understanding that they did care about family, legacy, and like those other motivational factors, right? And I remember going to my dad's commissioning and giving his first salute, and I remember him telling me, he was like, man, ain't none of these lieutenants no smarter than you.
Yeah, that's right.
He was like, he said, nobody here is smarter than y'all. He said, it's just, they just want a different way.
Different path.
He's like, he said, I was a tech sergeant yesterday. I'm a lieutenant today. He said, I'm the same person.
That's right.
He said, so seeing that like was I think a big motivator for me as some of the disappointment I may have had, or after that, I had another level of motivation that really pushed me. Go on my first assignment to Aviano, I'm an avionics technician, so I'm enlisted. And
as an avionics technician, so what are your responsibilities to doing avionics?
Oh, my responsibility as an avionics technician was to work on avionics on the F-16. So we worked on the electronic warfare systems that basically jam radar on fighter aircraft. So they taught us how to read wiring diagrams, wire and rewire anything. Like after that, I mean, I could rewire anything. I mean, that computer I built myself to do it with my eyes closed. But those are I didn't know much about electronics. Now I'm like, I could do a lot of stuff.
Because it shows you that there are a lot of things. I think what's key on that is understanding that there are some complicated things on how to do it, but it's not like you can't learn. And I think what's powerful with that is that whether it's the military or your own just understanding that like, hey, if I can do this,
I can do
that. Yeah. And the thing scholastically, right? And so you're like, well, maybe I'm not that, but you're like, hey, just as your dad said, we're all human beings, right?
Yeah.
And so you have mistakes and different things that happen, but it's when you embrace where you are and learn a lot about that. So after Aviano, what was happening in Aviano?
So at Aviano, I started taking classes on. I was going to classes at night on base. And I remember I was in class with an Army captain who was like, "So when are you going to commission?" Because in the Army they let people commission before they got before they got degrees, which was weird. But he's like, I said, "Well, I'm just taking these classes and see what happens." He said, "Well, hurry up and commission." He said, "It's nice over here."
Yeah.
So I kept getting these little nuggets to like, "Hey, keep going on your path. Don't let up." And I was able to work at angle where I actually left the Air Force early, went to the reserves into a ROTC scholarship.
Nice.
at University of Texas, San Antonio. So it started like it was like, okay, this is really starting to work out, which I was like,
things are kind of aligning, and this is what, 5 years later.
Yeah, so I'm sitting there like, this is interesting that if you just keep pushing towards the goal, things will continue to line up, even if there's things that are pushing away and obstacles. Things, yeah. Obstacles are in your way to see how bad you want it.
And I would like to pull on that a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't think it's necessarily an obstacle, it's an opportunity.
Yeah, yeah.
So like you learning, I think maybe if you didn't do the avionics tech and them showing you that, hey, it's not that hard, you can kind of do these things, that you would not have had the confidence to build your own computer.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
And so it's introducing you to do new things. And so that, some would call it detour, is actually something that in your design, that was what you needed at that time to help you grow and get older. And
sometimes mature too.
Maturity.
Sometimes those things, just like you said, it gives you an opportunity to grow in an area that you may not have thought you needed to grow in. And it gives you time. It's like, all right, now you have time, whether you wanted it or not.
Yeah.
If you use this time wisely, it will better prepare you for the things you have next.
Yeah.
So I did well in ROTC overall. College was I got a degree in math. Now I got a degree in math because I was like, well, the Air Force wants people with degrees in math, and if you have a degree in math, it means you're smart, right? Well, I got a degree in math because I didn't have to write any papers.
Oh,
so
that's why I did civil engineering.
So it was kind of one of the things was like, well, I know I'm good at math, and it looks good, it's one of those things. So funny thing is, so I learned how to prepare for the Air Force officer qualification test, right? So when I first took it, I took it in high school on a random Tuesday, and I didn't pass because I just took it on a random Tuesday. You didn't know it was, I just was like, why am I taking this? Then when I was in college at ROTC, I actually came up with a very specific plan. I knew what I needed to do to prepare for it, and I aced it. I did extremely well on it. So it was at that point, it was like, cool, this is how you got it. On to the next thing. So I got a pilot slot out of ROTC after they didn't give me a pilot slot. So first they didn't give me a pilot slot, then they gave me a pilot slot. And then I went to IFS. So at the point the Air Force said introductory flight screening. So it was a screening program. So I go there and I was like, well, I'm gonna go there and they're gonna teach me how to fly an airplane.
You hadn't flown.
I hadn't flown.
Yeah.
I think
you're doing the same thing I was.
I had got like a couple flight, like I had a
discovery flight or
something
like
flight.
that.
I got to fly in a T6, which I thought was the coolest thing in the world. And so I go there and I'm like, well, they're gonna teach us all how to fly. That's why we're here. The difference was by this time it was a screening program.
Yeah.
So we went there and I don't know what's worse, the fact that I didn't make it or the fact that I didn't know that I wasn't doing well.
Wow.
I think that was the part that caught me more off guard, is that I had no idea that I wasn't where I needed to be.
Man, that's
that was more of a shocker than I didn't do well at something. It was, how do I not recognize that I'm not where I'm at? Or the instructor's like, oh, well, it'll just be fine. It'll, these grades will be this, and then on your next flight, it'll be fine. And it's kind of like it was
something to be pulled into that, but
that's
we're too deeper. Right, that's like, different.
That's a whole nother. That's a whole nother. That's a whole nother thing there. But the one thing I wish I would have did at that point was I wish I would have called somebody. The thing is, I didn't know who to call.
Didn't know anyone.
I didn't know who to call. I had people that mentored me and other things, but I didn't know who to call at that time to help me figure out what to do. And honestly, that was probably, in my mind, I felt like that was the lowest point I felt, because I had made it to where I was like unsurmountable odds to be able to get to where it's like I got selected to go to pilot training, and then I didn't make it.
Yeah, this is your dream, right? This is what I've been fighting for, and now I'm here and I can't.
It's like,
oh man,
it's like I made it all the way this way. It's like making it to the draft and then getting cut.
Yeah.
After you get picked to play on on your team, and then you're like, well, now you didn't.
What are you gonna do now?
Right, and so that was tough, because I was at that point. I was like, what do I do now? I'm like, I was like, I want to fly. I want to, I'm like, I had visions of what I wanted, and someone that was a mentor for me, he said. I said, well, what are they going to do with me now? He said, just sit in your hands and you'll be all right, right? Basically, they were like, well, you did good. What it came down to was really good. They're like, you did really good on academics. Everything that was in control, you did well on. So we're saying you to go fly as a navigator.
Okay.
So I was like, so I still get to fly. So I don't got to be in the office. I was like, cool, let's do it.
All right. Yeah.
I was like, all right, cool, let's do it. So, and that was one of those where I was like, I'm glad I had someone in the room when my name came up, and that's one of those that if I had one thing, I at least had that was someone advocating for me. Big
At
picture.
least in that space.
Yeah. So at that moment, I had to switch my mentality, and people were like, well, you didn't get what you wanted, and you weren't where you wanted, so how do you still do good? And you still have to do good no matter where you're at, right?
Yeah.
And so my whole driving force at that point was like, all right, well, I got to be a good navigator. I still get to fly, get to go, still do a lot of stuff I want to do. May not be exactly what I want to do right now, but this is still what I want to do.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that I was like, it's not exactly what I wanted to do, but this is still what I want to do.
Yep.
So flew on the 𝐽-STARS, so surveillance aircraft. So I did that. And while I was there, upgraded instructor, and I also earned my private pilot certificate while I was there.
So while you were working as a navigator in the Air Force, you took time off on your own time to start going through your private pilot's process.
Yep. So I was working on my private pilot certificate after work, at lunchtime, and whenever I had time off while I was working a full-time job. And
so
now
you're putting in that work. You work, because I mean, you're double duty. At that point,
And being in the Air Force isn't 40 hours a week.
No, it is not.
So I wasn't working a 9 to 5, and it was like I was working. So I was also an exec at the time. So
you had all kinds of fun stuff.
So working through all my ratings, working through my private pilot certificate, I said, well, if I keep working on my ratings, then I could still become a pilot. That was my motivation. My motivation was, if I just keep if I keep doing this and prove that I can do this, then I'll be able to become a pilot in the Air Force.
So you were still trying to get your
that was my drive
to come back into the Air Force.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
That was the drive in my mind on how I was going to become an Air Force pilot, because in my mind at that point, there's no way you can become an airline pilot if you aren't an Air Force pilot or already built time in that time, because all the other pilots that were there, they're like, well, if you're not a pilot trying to become an airline pilot, there's no way you can do it, because there's not enough time. By the time you get out the Air Force, you won't have enough experience. You won't be able to build the experience. And he said, there's no way you'll ever be like an airline captain. It's just impossible. This is what they were like, it's impossible.
Yeah.
So they were it was like, it's impossible. There's no way it can happen. And they just raised they had just raised the requirements for you to become an airline pilot with the 1,500 rule. So they're like, well, you're not gonna become an airline pilot. So I was like, okay. And I knew nothing about it. And I don't even think I knew any airline pilots at that point. So I was like, well, I mean, you guys know what you're talking about. You're Air Force pilots. You must be smart.
Don't always believe that. Don't put somebody on a pedestal just because.
So the good thing was I took that energy of got my private pilot certificate, and that's when we started doing stuff with Legacy Flight Academy, and it's like, all right, well, I'm gonna try to help other people be able to not end up in the same situation. That was my
at least provide a resource, right? So I don't have to get you all the way through it, but hey, here's a way.
Right.
Here's a way to do it.
Because whenever I look back, well, what single thing would have helped me from having the crucial mistake at the most crucial time, right? At pilot training. I already know how to fly an airplane.
Yep.
And
you would have went right through screening.
Yeah, it would have been no issue, because like I remember one of the guys I went to college with, he showed up there and he already knew how to fly. So when he went through, he was like, he was like, all right, off, and spoiler alert, through all of these things, I still end up as an airline pilot at the end, which
100%.
So I got my private pilot certificate. I worked on my ISPA rating. I kept working on all my ratings with the intent that I'm going to apply to go back to pilot training in the Air Force. The thing is, I had been in the Air Force long enough to upgrade to instructor, go be an instructor at the schoolhouse for navigators, combat systems officers, help a lot of people, get through training and stuff. Working with Legacy Flight Academy and really understanding the landscape of aviation and aviation education. And when I became an instructor, I really understood what happened to me at at IFAS, that's a whole nother thing too. It's like, I know exactly how these things are written and I know how things are set up. But I look back and said, there's things I should have done to make so that there's no way that anybody could have derailed me. But by that point, it's like, do I apply for pilot training? But at that point, I had my private, my instrument, my commercial.
You had all your tickets.
I had
done.
all my ratings, and I was just getting more hours.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was like, I can become an airline pilot.
I don't need to go to the military.
Right.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that I didn't, because I had enjoyment flying in the military as an instructor, and then when I went to the reserves as a C-130 navigator, I got my fix on flying military, and I said, I can go be like an airline pilot. Man.
Yeah.
Like at that point it was the lifestyle that I wanted as an airline pilot, because I had done all the lifestyle of being a military aviator.
Yeah.
And so it was like, can I really do this? And so once again, it was one of those, I bet on myself, and I left active duty. I was 04 at the time, made 04, and 04's got paid pretty good.
Yeah, major.
I said, man, I make pretty good money here. You know, life is good. I was like, life is good. I could just ride this out, you know?
Yeah.
I was on track made 04. I was like, I'll make 05 if I stay. I might become a squadron. I was like, I can just ride this out for the next, I had 8 more years left.
Yeah.
But I said no, because I don't want to wait 8 years to go do what I want to do.
Nice.
Now, also at this time, I'm a single dad too. So,
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't just, I'll just get out and won't have to worry about it. I had to get out and actually, I had to do some soul searching.
Yeah.
To really ask myself, do I really want to do this? And people say, well, what's in the way? Well, is it money? Is it family? It's like, I can make all those things work if I have to sacrifice enough things. And I was like, I'm willing to sacrifice all of these other things. I moved from a big house to a 2-bedroom apartment. I had a Nissan Altima instead of the Lexus that I had. I didn't buy new. I was like, I got a used car and a 2-bedroom apartment, and I'm gonna go make this work. Cause I'm like, I made all this other stuff work.
Yeah.
So I bet on myself, because I'm like, I know how to win.
There you go.
I know how to win. So did that one and got my finished getting my hours. I built all my time I needed, and just like when I had found a way to become an officer in the Air Force and didn't believe I was making it, I was working through all of these things, flying, doing everything you need to be competitive to become an airline pilot. Everything from knowing how to network, being involved in organizations,
Going to conferences,
getting the experience. Because people say, well, what do I need to do to be competitive? Get the hours. Like, you can sit there and say,
get the hours. And meet people.
Meet people, right?
I wanted to pull one thing.
Yeah,
that you were talking about your journey, and that when you kind of started getting involved in Legacy Flight Academy, and you know, just like on this shirt, like when our tagline, "No, Live, Grow," is that one of the powerful things that we have on staff and everyone that works with Legacy Flight Academy is that we've had experiences, and so we know our different paths, and in a lot of ways we didn't have guidance from or someone to kind of show us that way. And what I think was powerful with us is we have all these different pathways to aviation,
right,
into the space. And right now we're specifically talking about pilots, but we know we live and then we grow. And so that's the grow part, is where I think that's why we're here, is to grow that next generation, to be that resource, to help folks understand, hey, well, what can I do? How can I, well, should I study before I go to pilot training? 100% yes. Yeah. Should I go practice? 100% yes. Yeah. Set yourself up the best way possible, because a lot of times you don't have second chances. And I'll touch one thing real quick, is when I took a break from flying after I retired for about 4 years. Yeah. And there's a little bit of a journey there to try to get back into aviation. And in the Air Force, I had a very, very successful military career. I got to do a lot of amazing things. I flew reconnaissance aircraft for almost 9 years, and then I flew presidential airlift for maybe. I did presidential airlift for about 7 years, so I flew for Bush and Obama. So I thought I had a strong resume. Yeah. But then when I'm applying to the airlines, I hadn't flown in a while, and they were saying, well, you know, you need to have 100 hours, and there's some issues with that. But fast forward, after I got the 100 hours, I was up for my first interview, and it was my interview with United Airlines. And I said, man, I already know, I interview people at Boeing.
Yeah.
I interview people from command level for jobs in the Air Force. I was like, I know how to do this. But I said, I have one chance. And I was going to do, it was whether or not I was going to pay the money to do the interview prep.
Yes.
And I said, I pretty much know how to do this. But I said, you have one chance. And I go, I cannot go on this journey to become an airline pilot and not say I did everything I could to prep myself the best way to do the best. And so I went to the interview prep. I paid the money to do the interview prep. It was good. I learned some tips and techniques. Could I have done it without it? Maybe, but there's no way. You have when you're going in for an airline interview or any job interview, you prep yourself the best. And like for you and I, we both went to pilot training thinking that the Air Force
already prepped
was going to show, they're going to show you how to do it. I say in life, if you prep yourself to be the best you can be when you're showing up at whatever you're going to do.
Yeah.
And I think when I took that was a lesson for me in my heart that I was like, hey, I want to be best prepared for this.
Yeah.
You know, and I took it, and you know, and I was the first airline to call me, and then I got a couple. After that, it was just like everybody wanted me. I went from being nobody wanted to see me to everybody wanted me, and I was like, there was an emotional change in there because for a long time I was like, man, I don't know if I'm good enough. Despite everything that I had done, I was like, I don't know if I'm good enough to be an airline pilot. Like I even questioned after a 20-year military career, I was like, man, maybe I'm not good enough to be an airline pilot. And it gets in here, and you have to fight that. That's in everything that you do in life, right? So there'll be some things, and you can be your own worst enemy.
Yeah. And the thing is, if you let that get in your way, that goes to like hazardous attitudes that we have in flying. It's like if you resignate, it's like you know that you have full control.
Yeah.
Don't give up, you know, keep going. Cause I sat there and went through that many times like, man, is this real? It's like, am I really? Cause you're right, because you start comparing yourself to other people or to what you think
their life is like, or what
their life's like, or what you think they want. And I'm like, hold up. Cause I was like, am I really about to be an airline pilot? When I got the call from America, I said, did they really just, is this real?
What I will tell you, and I don't know who said it, but comparison is the thief of joy.
It is. Yes, we know that
we know that joy in life and everything.
Look, we know that sitting in the cockpit, flying with other people, and like, oh, over there they got this. Oh, it's like, hey, chill out. It's nice over here. We got champagne problems.
We got, you know, hey, this is gonna be all right. So
cool, man. Good. I tell you what, we probably could sit here and talk for.
We'll do part 2. We'll do another part 2.
We'll definitely, man. Because, but I think big takeaways is that I got from your story is ultimately like, you know, do everything you can do to be prepared, and don't get in your own head, and you know, your journey is your journey. Make it work.
Yeah, and I think for you, a lot of the things in everything that you talked about, it's about giving back, right, and helping others, and that's a key culture thing that we have at Legacy Flight Academy, is to be able to give back. That's what we want to do. We want, hey, there's a way to do it. And there are multiple ways, and your path may not look like other person's path, but there's a way to get here and be a resource to kind of help people on.